Merry meet. So the wheel turns once again. We find ourselves on the threshold of Mabon season. So Mabon is often referred to as the witches' Thanksgiving for a very important reason. It's a point in the wheel of the year when we are called to foster our gratitude, to look towards the harvest, give thanks for what we have received in the past year, and also begin turning inward and making those preparations for the inner work that we'll do later in winter. So, Merry Meet, I'm Aislin. This is Ask Aislin. I'm here tonight talking about Mabon, fall equinox, and also answering anyone's questions in the Q&A at the end. So if you're here with me live, welcome. It's so good to see you guys. Hi, Melinda. I see Melinda in the comments. So if you're here with me live, feel free to leave comments or questions. I'll answer all the questions at the end during the Q&A. If you are watching this back in replay on YouTube later, make sure that you subscribe to our channel, Body, Mind, Witchcraft, and you won't miss any of our future episodes. And if you like any part of tonight's episode, feel free to leave a heart or a thumbs up, and it just helps us get this in the feed of more people. So hi, saying hi, Katie, Amy, Melly. We got a lot of people joining. So welcome, everybody. So I'm going to dive in. Let's talk about Mabon fall equinox, where we are in the wheel of the year. And like I said, the Q&A at the end, you can leave any questions. It doesn't have to specifically be about Mabon. It can be about anything. I'll answer anything you've got. So Mabon is the sabbat that corresponds to the fall equinox. And this particular year, Mabon is falling, depends on where you are in the world, but on the west coast where I am, Mabon technically, or I should say the fall equinox technically, will fall very close to a midnight on Friday night. So what that means is for the rest of most of the rest of the world, the fall equinox is actually falling in the early hours or even into the kind of the late hours of morning of Saturday, the 23rd. But the thing about all of our Sabbats is that it's important to not think of them as just one singular date, but to think of them rather as the entrance into a season. And in reality, when the Sabbats are celebrated, they're often celebrated from the sundown of the day before to the sundown of the next day. It's kind of the way a Jewish holiday is also celebrated. So from that perspective, many people will begin to celebrate Mabon this year on Friday night when the sun goes down, and they can celebrate all the way to Saturday. But if you miss that time period, it's okay, because we have about 6 weeks of Mabon energy. I should say more like 5 weeks of Mabon energy before it starts to shift more into that Samhain energy. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that energy feels like later in the episode. So you will see people celebrating at different times. Some people choose to celebrate the Sabbats before the actual date, and some people choose to celebrate after that exact date. And there's reasons why you would do it before or after, and I'd like to talk about those. So many people will celebrate before, and the reason for that is there's this belief in us as witches helping to turn the wheel of the year. So I know, for example, Christopher Penczak, last year, I haven't seen what he did this year, what date he chose, but last year he chose to have his Mabon ritual prior to the actual astrological Mabon. And the idea here is that the witches help to turn the wheel, to bring that transition in for the rest of the world. I really like that idea a lot. Now, another perspective is to have the Sabbat occur, or the celebration occur after the astrological date. And what that means is that we're well placed in that energy of the Sabbat, as opposed to doing it before. We're still kind of in that transitional state. We're still in the energy of the Sabbat that came before. So for this particular one, that would be Lughnasadh. So when you're choosing when to celebrate the Sabbat, you can think about those two different things. Do you want to be well placed in that energy? And therefore you would probably want to do it later, after the Sabbat has come, if you can't celebrate on the exact date. Or do you want to help the wheel turn? In which case you might choose to do your celebration prior to the Sabbat's exact date. Now, I also believe, though, that, like I said, Sabbats are really about a seasonal energy. Let's just talk for a moment about the Sabbats. Where do they come from? What is the origin of the calendar of the Wheel of the Year? So we have two different types of Sabbats. We have solar-based Sabbats, and we have agricultural-based Sabbats. So the solar-based Sabbats were celebrated up to, we know, around 12,000 years ago. No one was actually calling them sabbats at that time, but there were these celebrations that were aligned to solar points of the year, and this would be one of them. So these would be both of the solstices and both of the equinoxes, which are tied to those actual solar dates. And originally, these festivals were probably fire festivals because they were connected to the sun. People were drawing in that energy of fire. The the reality is that much of it had to do with planting dates as well. So these were dates that might have been important in the planting of the crops that would sustain the people. Now, with the rise of Christianity, unfortunately, many of these holidays, these festivals, either were deemed illegal or they fell out of favor with the people or just kind of fell out of their consciousness as people transitioned into the new religion. Now, there were some pagans who willingly converted, and there were others who did not so willingly convert. And in order to try to persuade more people to convert to the new religion, much of the lore of the sabbats and some of the practices were actually absorbed by the church. And this is why you see in, for example, Yule, you'll see many practices from pagan Yule. You'll actually see that in the Christian churches. Imbolc became Candlemas in the Catholic Church. Ostara became Easter, and like I said, Yule became Christmas. And over time, many of the people who were converted forgot where the practices even came from, and they would consider those to be Christian practices, though us as pagans know that that is not the truth, right? Now, so we today will be celebrating one of those solar-based sabbats. Now, there are also agricultural-based sabbats: Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lughnasadh. Those sabbats tended to be tied to other points of the year that might have been connected to the harvest as well. Now, the current wheel of the year is actually an amalgamation of two different sets of holidays. There was no one in the history of the world until modern pagans who celebrated all eight of these sabbats in succession. But as modern pagans, we put them together, and it's a useful way to study the changes of the energy in each year. And so, if you study any Ayurveda, if anyone studied Ayurveda before, you might know about the doshas. You might know that there are doshas, which are elemental compositions that correspond to not only parts of your body, parts of yourself, but also to the energies of the year. So it's a very similar system, and what it does is it teaches you how to work with the energies of the seasons in order to find optimal health. Now, the sabbats have a similar idea, which is when we celebrate the sabbats, we do so for several reasons. I think one of the main ones is just to come together as pagans and celebrate something. These are the holidays that have meaning to us. But another reason to celebrate is to find peace and wholeness within, to be with the flow of the seasons rather than to be against it, right? So when we're in the summer, we're at the height of the summer, let's say we're at Litha, we're full of energy, there's so much fertile energy there, and we can utilize that energy. And when we are at Yule, on the other side of the wheel of the year, we feel that turning inward, there is a lot of darkness. But there's also that seed of light that is the hope for the new harvest that will eventually come and the new things that will come as the new year comes as well. So modern witches, we can ride that wheel and feel those energies, bring them into our lives. So I always tell people, if you really want to, live within the wheel of the year, figure out how to utilize those practices. So as we're coming into Mabon, this is about the second harvest. It's about looking at the fruits of your labor. What have you produced this year? And giving thanks for those things, giving thanks to the earth, and also preparing for what's coming in the winter. But this helps us find a connection to that energy of the wheel. Now, I also believe that witches are healers. All witches are healers, whether they practice healing modalities on others or not. And I feel that part of our purpose as witches is to help heal the earth. And so when we are following these sabbats, when we are celebrating them, when we're acknowledging them, we heal the earth a little bit more, which is so important because we live in a world where the collective, for the most part, has forgotten these old practices and has forgotten our connection to the earth. If our collective really, truly believed that we were that connected, we wouldn't do the things we do to destroy the environment, right? But as witches, even these small practices we do, celebrating that wheel of the year as it turns, observing it, helps to kind of rebalance some of that energy just a little at a time. So let's jump in and talk specifically about Mabon. And again, if anybody has any questions, it can be about Mabon or it can be about anything else. I see Patrick is here. Hi, Misty, Sabrina. Nice to see everybody. Okay, so the Mabon, the autumn equinox, autumnal equinox, is usually found somewhere between the 20th and the 23rd of this month of September. And this would be up in the northern hemisphere. Now, if people are in the southern hemisphere, they're actually going to be celebrating Ostara right now, and their Mabon would be in the spring. Now, this is a time of equal day and equal night. And so that is very important because what that means is Mabon is also a time of balance. And we're going to talk more about that when we talk about what a person could do to celebrate Mabon. Now, this is a transition space. And whenever we are in transition spaces, the veils become a little bit thinner because we're transitioning from one energy to another energy. This is the transition between summer and fall. And especially if you live in a place where the seasons change drastically, you probably notice the coolness and crispness in the air that is creeping in right before Mabon. Even here in Los Angeles, it's been cooler at night. You can kind of feel that chill in the air that is showing us that the wheel is turning. Now, that theme of balance, like I said, we'll talk more about it later, but what we have is the earth beginning to die. So we have moved fully into the dying half of the season. Well, while we probably could not see that at Lughnasadh, I mean, we started to see a glimmering of that. At Mabon, that becomes very clear. Leaves have started to fall. Things are starting to rot on the ground. The foliage is starting to rot and produce soil that we will need to sustain the next harvest. If we follow the story of the god and the goddess, which comes from the Wiccan religion, but even witches who are not Wiccan can appreciate this story. The goddess, who is out in the world right now, she begins her descent into the underworld. Now, this is also the second of the harvest festivals, like I mentioned. So the first harvest festival is Lughnasadh. This is where we begin to harvest the grains, and we feel gratitude for that. It's also a holiday that's very much tied to prosperity. Now, Mabon also has that connection to prosperity, but it's the second harvest. This is where we begin to harvest the fruits. This could be the gourds, pumpkins, things like that. And the harvest is then blessed, and an element of it is generally sacrificed back to the land, just like at Lughnasadh. Now, the holiday appears to be named after a Welsh god who's named Mabon, and he was the son of Modron, who is actually considered to be a personification of the earth herself. So there's a lot of connections there to Lughnasadh, because Lughnasadh is named after Lugh, whose foster mother, Tialtu, is also considered a personification of the earth. So we see a lot of similarities between these two holidays, at least in their lore, and that would suggest that there is a similar feeling, a similar energy to Lughnasadh and Mabon. Now, Mabon himself as a god, he was considered the light bringer. Some would say he was the divine sun. That was an epitaph of his. He is a god of youth. And so we see him as the wheel is starting to turn further into that dying half of the year. Now, it's said that he was actually born on the fall equinox, and he so for that reason is often called the great son of the great mother, since again his mother was a personification of the earth. Now, the story says that he was kidnapped for 3 days and 3 nights, and during that captivity he was taken down into the other world. And there it was called Modron's womb. So I think that the story is very interesting because anytime that we have the gods or goddesses being taken down into the underworld, number one, they open themselves up to being allies for us during our shadow work. Number two, though, they point down into an unconscious aspect of ourselves that we can discover when we're working with them. So he was taken down into the underworld for these 3 days and these 3 nights. And again, remember, he's the light bringer. There he was in Modron's womb. And in some stories, they say he was rescued by an eagle. Some say he was rescued by an owl. It's usually a bird, a blackbird. Some say a stag or a salmon. So an animal came and rescued him. And some actually say, because he is tied into the stories of King Arthur, some actually say it was King Arthur himself who came and saved Mabon. But while Mabon was in Modron's womb, this was a place where he was challenged and he was nurtured, just like we essentially are in our own shadow work. And there's where he grew into his strength and into his wisdom before he was then reborn as the son of light. So I love his story because it's literally a metaphor for our own shadow work journey. And when we go down into the depths of the unconscious, we uncover what is there, pull it out, and then we're reborn as a different aspect of ourselves. Now, there's also an obvious connection to the story of Demeter, Persephone, where Persephone returns to the underworld right around the fall equinox as well. So that is a bit of the background, a bit of the lore. Let's talk about what other cultures are doing at this time too. So there are, with any of our sabbats, we generally have connections to other cultures and what they were celebrating. So the Greeks actually have a festival of Dionysius that occurs right around the same time. The Catholics have a feast called Michaelmas, or the Feast of Saint Michael, that occurs on the 29th of September, so near the end of the month of September. So again, not directly connected to Mabon, but there usually is a Catholic holiday somewhere near each of the Sabbats. The Iroquois had the corn dance that took place right around this time and continues to take place for those who are still observing it. The original Thanksgiving, in fact, took place on October 3rd. So it was later moved into November in American history. Sometime, I always forget which president moved it. But originally, that original Thanksgiving took place in October the 3rd. And so this led modern pagans to adopt or Mabon as the witches' Thanksgiving. So you will hear many, many people talk about Mabon as the witches' Thanksgiving. So this is really a time to take stock of what has occurred during the prior parts of the wheel of the year, see what you have been provided with, feeling gratitude for the things that you have. Also feeling gratitude for the things that you don't have, for the things that you want more of. You can feel gratitude for those things as well by putting kind of your gratitude into the present, even into something that has yet to take place, will take place in the future, is a manifestation technique that can be very profound at Mabon especially. I feel that this is true most of the time, but I feel like especially now, life is very complicated, it's very hard, there's a lot of pain and sadness and grief in the world, and so this is a time really when we can come together and we can try to let go of some of those negative emotions and and really feel that gratitude, which can kind of lift us up out of some of that negativity. So it's important to remind ourselves too of what we have, rather than dwelling on what we don't have. Mabon is a great time to write a gratitude list. So I have a teacher who recommends a 7-minute gratitude practice every morning. And it can be hard to commit to that, but what she says is you basically, when your alarm goes off, you stay in bed, keeping your eyes closed for 7 minutes, and you just do a inventory of all the things that you're grateful for. And on many mornings, it's going to be the same things. Could be gratitude for having your car paid off, or gratitude for having enough money for the grocery bill this month. It can be gratitude for a new job you received, or a person in your life, or whatever. And you just basically recount this inventory of gratitude for 7 minutes. When I do the practice, I set it on my watch, 7 minutes, and then I just say, I'm grateful for, I'm grateful for. You let one thought lead to another. If 7 minutes is a lot, try 3 minutes. And it doesn't have to be every single day. But the idea of something like that is when we make it a repetitive practice, we make that more part of us. That energy becomes part of us. So if you can adopt that during Mabon season, that can be especially a good time to do it. Now, it's also a time to give gratitude, give back to the community you live in, or give back to the earth in gratitude. So good time to donate food, or you can donate your time somewhere. If there's a food drive, or if there's a place in the community that needs volunteers, volunteering to help at a charity, a clothing drive, different things like that. I also think Mabon's a really great time to work with the heart chakra, to work with the heart space. So when we can open up our heart to foster that sense of gratitude, we expand our ability to receive as well. So we're basically sending that out, and then we open up that more receptive energy. So one thing that I love is mudras. So mudras are usually hand gestures that will change the body energetically, or they at least change your energetic body. And so one that I particularly love is the Garuda mudra. Garuda is the eagle god of the Hindu pantheon. And the mudra is very simple because it takes both hands, and we're going to place them over the heart, but you'll start with palms up like this. And then you take the palm of the right hand and you're just going to place it on the back of the left hand. And then the two thumbs kind of interlock like that. And so it's meant to look like the wings of Garuda, the eagle, and you could place it on your heart. And so when you are doing a gratitude practice or gratitude meditation, I love making this mudra because it expands the heart energy. You can use this mudra for anything, though, in order to expand the heart's energy. If you want to work with your heart chakra, if you want to feel more acceptance for yourself or for others, if you want to I guess like foster some self-compassion, which is hard for a lot of people. You can also use this mudra. It's very good to do it during meditation as well. So I like to share that out. I like to share that with people. So good for your gratitude practices. Now, like I mentioned earlier, because of that connection of going down into the underworld and the story of Mabon himself, this is a great time to work on your shadow work. So we talk a lot about shadow work and the lunar cycle. Shadow work can be done any time of the wheel of the year. But in a lunar cycle, I should say, more people feel receptive in the waning half of that cycle, and they get more and more and more receptive as they get closer to the dark moon. And so that's the reason why many people feel like turning inward, and that's when they're starting to do a lot of their shadow work. Now, a similar thing happens in the wheel of the year. The wheel of the year, when we come to Mabon, we're like in that third quarter moon. We're coming into that final last part of the cycle. And so again, this is a great time. It's a very receptive time. You yourself are more receptive to looking inward, focusing on what's underneath the surface, exploring your shadow aspects. So a great time for that. Now, I did mention in the beginning, Mabon is a great time for balance. Now, I think that it's useful at Mabon and also at Ostara to really take stock about what's going on in your life. Think about where you spend your energy, right? So we all have energy and we have time, right? And those are actually resources. They're each resources. And we only have so much of either one of those. And so it's wise for us to look and take stock of where we're actually spending that. So are you spending your time and your energy on things that fill you up mostly? Or are you spending your time and your energy on things that take from you, that drain from you mostly? And so what you want to do is find some kind of a balance. We don't want to always be just taking, and we don't want to always just be giving. We want to find something in between. So I think this is a great time here and at Ostara to do a balance wheel. And I am going to post one in the group later on. And it's very simple. It just looks at different aspects of your life. It could be relationships, work, sleep, rest, food, different things like that, prosperity. And you really look at and take stock of where is most of my energy going? And is it going into a place that's fulfilling? And sometimes it can be very eye-opening. Some people do this and they find, wow, my life is really, really balanced. And then other people will do it and they will see that their life is pretty unbalanced, that they're spending a lot of energy in certain areas that maybe aren't filling them up as much as they could. So very good time to kind of think about that. But in addition to that, is think about ways to balance your body. This is a good time to balance your chakras. So if you have a chakra that needs work, it's a good time to work on it and try to bring it into balance. But it's also a good time to work on the entire system and see if you can bring that into balance. And that can be as easy as simply closing your eyes and drawing energy from the earth up into your root chakra and kind of letting it sit there, and then drawing the energy up into your sacral chakra and letting it sit there. And then you draw it up through all of the energetic centers. Now, I will be doing a series of episodes coming up on each of the chakras. I did them like over a year ago here in the group, and I want to redo them and bring in some new stuff. So just know that that's coming up. But in Mabon, it's a good time also to just work on the entire system. Um, what else here? So another thing that's very good if you want some balance is there's a breath called Nadi Shodhana. Nadi Shodhana is a very good balancing breath because it balances the feminine and the masculine channels of the body. And it doesn't matter what gender we are, we all have feminine and masculine energy. The feminine energy tends to be on the left side of the body, and the masculine energy tends to be on the right side. And so we will notice that we have more of one type of energy and less of another at different times. So, for example, when you're going into meditation and you're into more of a receptive space, you're tipping more into that feminine energy. And when you're more activated and you're doing things and you're putting things into motion, you're more in that masculine energy. But at the end of all of this, we want to try to find some balance, and it's very easy to get out of balance. So one thing you can do is Nadi Shodhana. So very simple, I'm going to show it here. So what you do is you are going to take your thumb and you place it on your right nostril lightly, and then you're going to place your pointer finger on your left nostril like this. And so you're just going to press down. And so basically the other fingers, I'm sorry, so take that back. So thumb on the right nostril and the ring finger on the left nostril. And then the two pointer and middle fingers, you can place them on your forehead or just kind of let them dangle. And the idea here is that you're going to close off one nostril. So let's start by closing off the right. And then you would breathe deeply through the left nostril. And you may find that that's pretty blocked, and that's okay. So you breathe deeply through that. Then you're going to go ahead and close off the left nostril, and then you'll open up the right nostril and you'll exhale through the right. You're going to go back and forth like this, and then you'll inhale through the right. And then you'll close that off with the thumb, and then you'll exhale through the left. And then you inhale through the left, close it off with the ring finger, open up the right, and then exhale through the right. And you would go back and forth between those two sides. And what you may observe is that one side seems more blocked than the other. And that is natural. It's just our patterns change throughout the day, and sometimes the left channel is more open and sometimes the right channel is more open. But if you do the Nadi Shodhana and you do the back and forth breathing, what you're assured to do is to try to balance the entire system. So really good breath to do for balancing. Now, as witches, we also want to know how are we going to celebrate the Sabbat with ritual, with spell work, with an altar. So let's talk a bit about that. So an altar, you can build an altar specifically for Mabon. So some people like to have one altar in the house that they kind of change out as the wheel of the year passes. So when you're in the summer months, it's going to look different than when you're in the winter months. And then some people like to set up a temporary altar that would just be for that specific Sabbath, or perhaps even just a temporary altar that's just for a ritual that they're doing. So regardless of what kind of altar you're going to set up, some good things to put on it for Mabon would be apples, grapes, any kind of fruit. So again, this is the fruit harvest. So any kind of fruit can go there. If you grow fruit, if there's fruit trees in your yard, bring some of that in, place it as an offering on the altar. You can bless it during a ritual or a magical working. Leaves are a very good symbol of Mabon because this is the time of the year when the leaves are starting to fall from the trees. So you can put some leaves on the altar, a cornucopia, which symbolizes prosperity and wealth and the abundance of the harvest. That is a good symbol for Mabon. Colors are generally like those fall colors, so reds and yellows, oranges, maybe some brown, even gold and purple. And you can decorate the altar with those colors. You can get an altar cloth in those colors. I recommend going to Joann's and just get the fabric that's the extras that are left over after people have cut the rest of it off. And there's usually a bunch of leftover fabric, and find some pretty fabric. I found some velvet there, and you can make altar cloths to just put over your altars that way. Now, if you work with deity in your practice, there's a couple of deity archetypes that are very tied to Mabon. The earth and the grain mother is a very good archetype. And I'm going to talk at the very end about, we have a ritual coming up on Friday where we're going to be honoring the earth goddess in her form Pachamama, the pre-Incan goddess. But any goddesses who are connected to the earth, like Gaia, this would be a good one. Any earth goddess, grain goddess. The other deities that are often connected, or the other deity archetype, I should say, that's often connected to Mabon is the messenger or the magician god. So the messenger god is the god that brings messages from the other world, and he's also often a psychopomp, which means that he helps conduct souls from this land to the next one. And so those deities are also very good because they have that connection to the underworld. And again, this is in the Wheel of the Year, this is that space where the goddess is beginning to go into the underworld to follow the god who left for the underworld at Lughnasadh. Now, specific deities that we can use is Mabon himself, Modron, his mother. That would be a good pair to use. Demeter or Ceres, you could use that. Persephone, Kori as Persephone's maiden form. Proserpina, Rhiannon, Inanna. So a lot of these deities are going to be deities that are either earth-based or ones that go into the underworld. Tammuz, Dionysius, and Bacchus, and there we have that connection to the festival of Dionysius of the Greeks. And then, like I mentioned, Pachamama is the one that we've chosen to work with this year. Now, I do want to make a note about the solar and the lunar cycles and how they sync up. And I think this is always important to consider when we're looking at any sabbat. So we want to see where does that sabbat fall in the actual Wheel of the Year. And then we want to look at where the moon is and see how those two sync up or don't sync up. So for example, when we look at the Wheel of the Year, Mabon is taking place in near the end of the year, right? There's 2 more sabbats, and it depends on what you consider the end of the year. There's 1 or 2 more sabbats, but we've definitely come into the dying half of the year. We're basically halfway between the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And so if you were to match that up to the lunar cycle, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, that would be around 3rd quarter. Now, this particular Mabon is actually going to fall right on the 1st quarter, actually almost to the minute. And so what that means is that the lunar cycle is in the waxing half, and the solar cycle is in the waning half. And those two energies are a bit conflicting. So when those energies are the same, so let's say, for example, having Mabon on the 3rd quarter, having it fall like that, those energies would amplify each other, and they're going to make that energy feel even more pronounced. So for example, let's think about what Mabon energy is about. It's about gratitude. A lot of it's about turning inward, right? And so if we're in the 3rd quarter and at Mabon, we may find ourselves turning more inward. It may feel even a more pronounced and deepening of our internal worlds. But this Mabon, having Mabon fall on a 1st quarter moon, means you have that kind of amplified energy at the same time that the solar cycle is turning inward. And those are going to be in opposition to one another. So what that means, though, is nothing bad. It just means this Mabon may be more celebratory and less turning inward. And so it's just always wise, I think, to look at where's the solar cycle and where's the lunar cycle, and do they match up, and how is that going to change their respective energies. So I did want to mention a bit about our ritual that's coming up, and then I'm going to dive into the Q&A, okay? And I have some questions people sent me, and then anybody who's got questions for the feed, go ahead and put those in, and I'm going to answer anything. It can be anything. It doesn't have to be about Mabon or the sabbats. But I want to talk about our ritual. So we are doing a gratitude for the earth ritual with Pachamama this Friday, the 23rd. It takes place at 5:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 p.m. Eastern. And this is a free ritual that we do. So every year we always do a free ritual at Mabon. Our other rituals are you can get a ticket for a donation of as little as $1. But this particular one, you don't even need to donate. So if you are in our group, you'll be able to find an invitation pinned to the top of the Body, Mind, Witchcraft group. Inside is all the information about the ritual, as well as a Zoom link. If you're watching this on YouTube, just go below the video and there will be a link where you can go and get all the information as well if you want to attend. So we are very excited about this ritual. It's similar to the one we did last year, but not identical. We are honoring the goddess Pachamama, and we are working with the intention of gratitude. So we're going to really take into a consideration that idea of the witches' Thanksgiving. And we hope that you can join us. If for those who can't come, like I said, it's 5:30 p.m. Pacific on Friday. If you can't come, there will be a replay afterwards, and we'll have that on both the YouTube channel and it will be in the Facebook group as well. If you have any questions about the ritual, let me know. But a simple ritual to honor the earth, send gratitude back to the earth. Like I said in the beginning, I feel that we as witches are healers, whether we feel that we're healing others or not. We are healers of the earth, and we help turn that wheel. And by us coming together as a collective and sending healing energy and gratitude towards the earth, I feel that we begin to heal it a little bit at a time. So I hope you will join us, and that is our ritual. All right, so I'm going to start with a couple of questions that were sent to me, okay? And then while I'm doing this, feel free to put some in the chat. I'll answer anything you've got. So this first question comes from Patrick, and I will say that Melly, she put a similar question in, so this answer is also for her. But she has a second part to her question I'm going to answer after this. So Patrick said, do you have contact with your spirit guides? And he said, if so, how do you communicate? He said, I've spoken and seen spirits, but can't quite make contact with my spirit guides, though I did see them in an Akashic Records meditation hypnosis. Okay, so this is a great question. And like I said, Melly had a very similar question about I'm having trouble contacting them or doing it regularly. And how do I do that? So a couple of ideas I have for you is some people find it easier to connect to the spirit guides than others. And I think it's just important to normalize your own experience rather than comparing it to other people. So I know for myself, and I'm going to get into this, like sometimes the messages come through, and if we're not aware of how they're coming through, we are liable to miss them, even though, and then feel that we're not connecting or communicating. So I, like you said, Patrick, I had a reading done where they read my aura, and this was totally news to me. I mean, kind of news to me, but it made sense. But one of the readers, she said that there was a guide who was coming through, and she said his name was Ralph, and he was a big burly guy, and the best she could say is like Tibetan or something, but from like ancient times, and he's with me all the time, and he wonders, she said, he's asking you why you don't listen to him. And it's really interesting because I had the reading on, I was recording her as she was doing it. She was looking at my aura and saying all of this. And in the video I say, I answer like, well, I didn't know he was there. Like, this is the first time I'm hearing about this big burly Tibetan looking guy who is trying to talk to me. But she gave me a message from him that very much resonated with me, to the point I don't think that somebody could just hit that nail on the head if this was all made up. So I was like, okay, there's some truth to this. And but at the same time, I felt that I had always felt like there was a guide somewhere, and I even felt that in my mind there were sometimes like messages that would come through that were not exactly my thoughts. And so what I realized is I had to get better at hearing, because I realized that there was stuff that was coming through all the time, and I just wasn't aware of it. So here's some thoughts I have. Like I said, some people are going to find it easier to work with them than others, or connect to them than others. And you had mentioned actually being able to contact and see spirits in the past, but not necessarily the spirit guides. And I will say, just to normalize this, sometimes people find it easier to do that than to actually hear the spirit guides. So just normalizing that. Whatever you saw in your Akashic records or your hypnosis or whatever you experienced there, it's a very good thing. Just like my story of the aura reading, it indicates that there is someone there. Like, there is someone there for everyone. But when you actually can kind of connect to it, like, because they've already come through, you already have made that connection. So here's what I would say is if during that reading you were able to get a name or any defining characteristics that can help as you're calling or trying to connect with that spirit guide in the future. If you didn't receive any of that information, that's okay. You can actually send out that request. You can actually go into a meditative state, set the intention that I'm going to connect with a guide, and ask the name. And then here's the number one thing, is that you have to trust what comes, because sometimes what happens is the name will come like Ralph. That's like a I was like the Muppets Ralph. I used to love him, the piano player Ralph, but it's not really what I thought of my spirit guide's name as being. But that was the name. And so whatever the name comes through, you really have to trust it. And it's just similar to what we were doing in our Shadow Seekers membership last week. We were working with past life regression, and like I told everybody there, is you really have to like make a deal with yourself that you're going to trust what comes through and not second guess it as, oh, that was just like me making it up. So when you engage in this work and you kind of set that intention, just trust that whatever's coming next is actually going to be an answer to the question that you just asked. The other thing I would say is really when you're going to connect to the spirit guide, you're going to try to connect to them, is make sure that you're very well rested. Sometimes we overlook that aspect. And so people who have come to me and asked similar questions before, and then when I kind of talk to them more, I find out that they're not really sleeping very well, and because of that, they're not dreaming, and you know, they're not getting enough sleep, they're not getting enough rest, they're not getting enough self-care. And so I would prioritize all those things. If those things are already good, then check that off, you've got that. But if you feel like you're lacking in any of those areas, I would set that as the foundation before I started to like really open up and try to connect and communicate. You also want to make sure that you're grounded when you're doing the practices. The third eye and the crown are what really opens up to the expansiveness of allowing us to connect to spirit guides. But what we will often find as witches, we're all up in that all the time. And we're like almost like a rootless tree. And so we really got to make sure that we're grounding down. So I feel like before doing any spirit work or trying to connect to a spirit guide, close your eyes and just imagine roots growing down out of your seat or your feet or whatever part of the body is touching the ground, and really make that anchor and that connection before moving forward with trying to communicate. I would get in the habit of the practice. That's the other thing, is that the more we practice something, even if nothing comes through the first few times, just getting in the habit, like once a week, you're going to go into meditation and you're going to set an intention that I am going to connect to a guide. And when you're there, you can have a list of 5 to 10, you can even write this out beforehand, a list of 5 to 10 things that you would like answers to or some guidance from your guides, and write those out and then offer those up to the guides for help. And then when you go into the meditation, you've grounded yourself, you go into that meditation, you set the intention, I'm going to communicate with my guides, and here's a question that I have. And then listen. And then here's where it gets, this is where we really have to trust. So we have to be very open to that receiving and open to how the insights come through. Because I will tell you is that probably for most people, it's very subtle. It's not like an earth-shattering voice that comes through. It can just literally be a voice in your head, a thought that pops in. But see, the thing is, if you've set the intention, I'm going to communicate with my guides, then that thought that comes in technically should be from them, right? Not from us. And that's where we got to kind of disconnect that whole, like, I'm not going to second guess myself. I'm just going to believe that it came from them. So like I said, it can be very subtle. When my communication comes through, it generally comes through in thoughts like that because I've set the intention. Now, the other way mine comes through a lot is through synchronicities out in the world that I see. So I set an intention recently, I guess about a month ago, that I wanted to know if what the path I was on, the decision I had made was the right one. And I set out this intention to my guides to give me feedback by showing me something specific in the world. And I said a red feather. And it's interesting because there are no red feathers anywhere ever where I'm hiking. And so I sent out this intention. And I'm not joking, there was like, I've never found so many feathers in my life, probably like 25. I just kept picking up and putting them in my bag and collecting these feathers I was finding. No red feathers though. And then right about when I was about ready to just say, okay, I guess the feathers weren't, the feathers should have been enough, 25 feathers. But right then, all of a sudden, a red dragonfly flew right in front of my face like this and then began to fly in front of me, kind of leading me down the trail. And I was like, okay, the universe has sometimes a different way of answering, but I was like, okay, I'm going to take that red dragonfly, which I'd never seen before, by the way, and I'm going to take that as my red feather. So that is one thing you can do, is kind of tell the guides like that's a way that we can communicate. And another thing that guides can sometimes do is like reveal a page of a book, or reveal a book that you should read. Like it might pop into your head, or they might reveal a like something to research, like a topic to research. So it's just like there's things that pop into your head when you've already asked for the guidance. The other thing you can do too is use tools to aid you. So like if you do any automatic writing, that can be a good way to connect to the guides, or just stream of consciousness writing. So again, you set that intention, like I'm going to communicate with my guides, and rather than just sitting there and meditating, you can begin to do stream of consciousness writing and just kind of write what's coming to your mind. And what some people find is that in the beginning, as they're writing, you just kind of write whatever's coming. It's you. You can tell it's you. And then at some point, it will start to shift. And some people notice that it's actually the point of view starts to shift. So whereas when we're writing, I'm saying I, it may start to shift to you. And whenever that starts to shift to you, especially in your mind or in your writing, that's often a sign that that is a guide who's communicating with you now. So that's something to consider. Another way to communicate is through the pendulum as well. So again, you set that intention. I'm going to communicate with my guides, and then use your pendulum to get some answers. But again, at the end of the day, I would say it all comes back to trust, and that lack of belief is going to be the undoing of all of us when it comes to that. So, release your expectations about how it should or shouldn't be done, and just figure out how it works for you. Like I said, the majority of people experience their guides through their head, through thoughts in their head, or through synchronicities out in the world. So just don't overlook those things. And others may actually feel physical sensations in the body too. So it takes some time. You can even ask your guides, tell me how you're going to communicate. And you might feel a warmth in your shoulder. And if you can key in on that, you're like, okay, my guides are communicating through my body. So again, it's just setting the intention and asking the guides how they want to communicate. All right, so I hope that helped. And I've got some more questions here. I see Tamara said she had a visit from a praying mantis recently. That's pretty cool. I've rarely seen one of those like out in nature. So that's a pretty neat sign. Okay, Angel asked me about color magic. And she said, is it something that someone needs to learn? And if so, how, or does somebody need to learn how to do it? So this would be my answer for any kind of magic or modality that anybody was asking about. You never need to do anything. There's nothing in witchcraft that you necessarily need to do. You just need to be, I think you need to be open and receptive and listen for your own path. But color magic is a magic that's very accessible to people. So if someone said you needed to do it, it could be that they mean, well, it's easy to do. It's a good way to connect to the magical world. So here's some ideas about color magic. It's just a simple form of magic where colors correspond to different intentions. So for example, the color green, it has the connection to prosperity and abundance and money and wealth. It has the connection to healing energy. It has the connection to the heart chakra. It has a connection to earth energy. So using that color to draw in that intention is a practice of magic that you can use. Now, a lot of people will marry color magic with candle magic, and then you can pick a candle that is the color of your intention, and right away you've already got the basis for a spell for that intention. The other thing that you can do is you can visualize colors. So if you want to draw in calmness, see if you can visualize the color blue and just see that sort of descend over you, or kind of that color rain down over you, kind of covering all parts of your aura. And you can do that with any color. Pink, if you want to bring in like compassion or self-love, or red, if you want to bring in more of that like fire energy and will and drive and things like that. Now, You can also bring more of that color just into your surroundings, into your clothing, into your jewelry. That's another way to work with color magic besides the visualization of the candles. And I also want to say that colors connect us to the energetic centers of the body, the chakras. And so we can use colors like, for example, the color red can connect us to the root chakra and our grounding and that connection to the Mother Earth and our stability and our security. And so one very effective way to work with the chakras is to work through color. So to answer the question, it's definitely not something you need to do, but it's a very accessible form of magic that has a lot of uh, ways that you can do it. You know, it has extensions into the energetic system, which to me is the gold in color magic. Okay, so next question is from June. June asked about releasing negative energy in the body. So she said, is there a way to help release the negative sludge that still seems to remain in my body? And I know June, and she's been doing some shadow work in our Shadow Seekers group. So I think she's talking about like, that's even after my work, I still have this kind of sludge in my body. And she said, I have areas that feel dense and heavy. And then I went ahead and asked a follow-up question about what body part, and if there was a specific body part. And she says, low back, upper back, between the shoulders. Okay. So this is very common. So it's very common. This is why I think pairing shadow work with energy work is better than just shadow work alone. Shadow work will clear out the emotional blockages, but it will often leave stagnant energy in the body, which is exactly what June is experiencing. And so when we bring in the energetic work, we begin to move that energy in the body and get that flowing again. And they get that stuck and stagnant energy. So that those dense areas you're feeling, that is likely to be stagnant energy. And it's literally left over from, whatever you released in your shadow work, whatever you're working on, it's just has ramifications. It connects to your energetic body, is so close to your emotional body. And so it's just energy that's still in the system. And we can easily get rid of it. So one thing that I would say, especially knowing the locations of her dense energy or that kind of stuck energy, is movement and breath work are, to me, two of the best ways you'll be able to move that energy very quickly. So I'm just going to demonstrate a few of these. And in our Shadow Seekers group, in our alignment practices section, there's more videos that have full practices like this. But these are a couple exercises that you can get started with very quickly. So this is very good for energy in kind of the middle section of the body and also up in the shoulders. And it actually could help dislodge a little bit in kind of like the low back as well. And you just sit with put your fingertips on your shoulders. You're going to turn to the left and inhale, and then you turn to the right and you exhale. And then the key here is it doesn't matter how fast you go, you're just syncing it to the breath. And what that does is it begins to move energy through the body, specifically through this part. So eventually you might go faster. It's like, and I would breathe in and out of the nose if I can. It's usually a quick breath in and out. And if it's too fast, you just slow down. And I recommend doing it for about 3 minutes and see how that feels. And what many people will find is after 3 minutes, they're going to feel like kind of this buzzing in the body. That's a sign that energy is moving. And if you do that practice regularly, like I'd say several times a week, you're going to find that you're going to start to move energy around. Okay. So now another thing specifically, since you asked about the back, the between the shoulders, is the shoulder shrug. So it's kind of similar. On the inhale, you bring the shoulders up, and on the exhale, you drop them down. And then you're just going to bring them up and down, and it just doesn't matter how fast again that you go. It's just about syncing the breath to the movement. Slow down if it's too fast, speed up if it's not fast enough. I do that one for about 3 minutes as well. And then a third one that you can do is you can either do this sitting, or I recommend standing because you said low back, and this one's really good for the low back. But I'm going to demonstrate it sitting. Otherwise, you won't be able to see me on the camera. And so when you're seated, that people tend to call this like stir the pot or Sufi grind. And basically what you do is you're just going to kind of do hip circles while you're seated. And you can do them in one direction and then the other direction. I recommend going really slow. Kind of imagine like it's like a bowl that you're trying to scrape stuff off the sides of the bowl, like frosting or something, and you just want to get into all those areas. And this would be very good for the low back. But stand up and do this. Put your hands on your hips and then just begin to do some slow hip circles. Very good for dislodging energy that is stuck in the low back. And then also because of the two places where you're saying that that energy, it seems to be like dense, this would be, the low back would be connected to your sacral chakra and your root. So working with those two energy centers can help. And then in your shoulders, that's likely to be connected to the heart chakra. So working with that chakra can also help move some of that energy. So I hope that helps. But if you got follow-up questions and you're here live, you can put them in the chat or come back later. And then Melly had one question. So she had a question similar to Patrick's in the beginning about spirit guides, but she also said that she's having trouble with guidance in her craft, even though I have done magic since I was young. I still feel like I'm a beginner. I'm just trying to find a way to learn from the beginning or where to start. Okay, so on our Body Mind Witchcraft YouTube channel, we have lots of videos about things related to witchcraft, as well as there's a lot of shadow work and energy work there, but there's also specific videos on witchcraft. So you can check those out, but they're not designed to be like an A to Z step-by-step training for the craft. If you want something like that, I recommend finding a good Witchcraft 101 book. I always love Christopher Penczak. I think his writing is fantastic, accessible. I've met him several times. He's a fantastic individual. He has a book called The Outer Temple of Witchcraft. I highly recommend this book. You can see I've used it a lot. Got a lot of bookmarks in it. This will teach you all kinds of the basics, from altar setups to gods and goddesses, to working with the elements, to the sabbats. It's all in here, front to back. So I recommend a good book like that. If you are Wiccan or interested in Wiccan, the set of books by Raven Grimassi, which were out of print and they're now back in print. This is the book Wiccan Magick, and there's a companion called Wiccan Mysteries. And these two books together are a very good like 101 to Wicca. So I just recommend a book like that. Some of these you can even find at the library. But get something like that, and that I think will help you, especially because you said, I just don't know, you want to learn all of it and you want to start at the beginning. That's where you can't really go like piecemeal into like YouTube videos, because unless you can find somebody who's doing like a full course on YouTube, everybody's videos are just going to be kind of like here and there scattered. Now, the other thing I will say is that we have a course called Demystifying Witchcraft. It's currently being taught right now live, but we're about to kind of end that, package it up, and I'm going to be selling it near Thanksgiving. And as a Shadow Seeker member, like Melly, you are, and anybody else who's in Shadow Seekers, there is a discount for that course, and it is a full Witchcraft 101. It teaches all the basics, altars, deities, elements, the magical mind, history of witchcraft. I mean, how to do spells, how to raise energy, like everything's in it. And so just know that's coming out like around Thanksgiving. We're going to have a good sale on it, and plus Shadow Seekers gets an additional discount. So something to think about for the future. But in the meantime, I would see if I could find a good Witchcraft 101 book. And if you want other suggestions on books, reach out and I can give you some more. I hope that helps. Okay, I'm going to see if before I go, I know we're almost at an hour here. Okay, so I'm going to see if there's anything in the chat that Tamara said that praying mantis flew at her through the living room. That's pretty cool. And then she said, before I fall asleep at night, I always surround myself with a green mist. And that is a really effective form of color magic. So bringing in that energy of green, connecting to the heart chakra, also connecting to like healing and earth energy. June says she'll visualize herself in a bubble of a specific color. Yeah, that's a really good way also to bring in that color magic. Stephanie said, lately moths stay by my side during bedtime when I have something challenging happening, like taking her licensure exam. That's really interesting. So it sounds to me like the moth could be a spirit animal or a spirit guide of yours. Definitely something to explore, I think. Okay, let's see. And then a couple people saying that they loved the book, the Christopher Penczak book, and Jenny said he's awesome because I know Jenny has met him too. He's an awesome individual. If you ever have a chance to go somewhere where he's speaking, um, he's so good. Like Pantheacon, which doesn't really take place anymore here in California, he used to speak at that all the time. So I was able to go to several classes of his. Yeah, great guy. Um, Misty said she is also surrounds herself with a green mist. She says she associates green with healing and protection from the Mother Gaia. Yeah, totally connects you to the Mother Earth, whatever form that takes for you. And yeah, she said her favorite color is emerald green. The second book I mentioned, Amy's asking about the second book. Okay, so the second book is called, let me see if I can get it on, I can see the camera. Okay, yeah, it's called Wiccan Magic. So again, this one would be for if someone's interested in Wicca, but it does take you through, it's like a whole Wicca 101. This author is Raven Grimassi. Sadly, he's crossed over. These books were out of print for a long time, but they are back in print. And there's two books. It's Wiccan Magic, and then the one that comes right before it is called Wiccan Mysteries. And I don't have it. Beth, the Maiden of our Coven, she has that one. But both very good books. I highly recommend. Let me see if anything else is here. Tamara said it's how she connects to the earth and gives back energy that it gives to me when I'm sleeping. Yeah, that's a really, it's always good, whatever energy we feel like we're receiving, is to somehow figure out a way to give it back as well. Lynn said, what are some ways to change negative thinking patterns? So a simple way, I mean, that is like, you could take whole classes on that. And I will say, because Lynn is in our Shadow Seekers membership, I would check out the workshop from December. It's called Transforming Negative Thoughts into a Power Mantra. And so it teaches a whole method of how you can take a negative thought and you can transform it, and then you can actually make it into something that will aid you. But just the simple answer to it is, so we have these negative thoughts, and they say that we have about 80,000 thoughts. Most of them are negative or irrelevant. Most of them are not facilitating our health or our well-being or anything like that. And so if you notice that there's a thought that's coming to you that is very negative, and especially if it's one that's repetitive, you've noticed it over and over again, see if you can negate it. So let's say, for example, someone has a negative thought that's like, I will never have enough to be secure. I'll never have enough money to be secure. And you have that thought in your mind, you catch yourself with that. It sounds too easy to work, but you simply negate the thought by saying, I always have enough to provide for myself, or I always have enough to feel secure. And when you change it, you're changing the energy. You are creating your reality with your thoughts. So as you are saying negative things, or you're catching yourself saying negative things, you're actually reinforcing those thoughts. So if you can change them, you can start to change those pathways. And like I said, it sounds very simple, but it is very effective. Now, another thing that I really like to do is I work with the goddess Lakshmi. And there is a counterpart to Lakshmi that's called Alakshmi. Alakshmi is the opposite of Lakshmi. So Lakshmi is about abundance and prosperity and fertility and wealth and growth. And Lakshmi is all that isn't. It's lack and it's negativity and it's darkness. And so what I do is, whenever I have a negative thought, or I find myself really ruminating and really being drowned in those negative thoughts, I just notice that that's all Lakshmi. And in the Vedas that talk about this goddess, they say that when Lakshmi, when Lakshmi is there, Lakshmi cannot exist. And when Lakshmi is there, Lakshmi cannot exist. The two cannot exist in the same place. So when she's in your mind and she's creating negativity, Lakshmi isn't there. The goddess of abundance isn't there. So I just say, okay, that's all Lakshmi. And I kind of let that go, and I'm going to invite Lakshmi in. And so I'm going to change my vibration by bringing in a goddess that's actually about positivity and abundance and things like that. So that is a way to kind of, I would try to change those thoughts. But for Lynn especially, go check out that workshop from December when you get a chance. And I think I think you're really going to find it beneficial. Amy said she couldn't find it on Amazon. I'm not sure which book. Both of these books should be on Amazon. I mean, the Outer Temple of Witchcraft for sure. These ones are for sure on Amazon. I'd be surprised that Wiccan Magic wasn't on Amazon, though they did just re-release it. But try to Google it again. The author's Raven Grimassi, and see where else you can find it. Let me see here. I think Elizabeth said she finished the course. I think you're talking about that December workshop about negative thoughts. That's a really good one. And you create like this little mantra that you can bring with you. Train of thought. Tamara was saying if you find a positive through the negative, it can help change your train of thought. Yeah, a lot of it is you changing your own thoughts. And June said Ariel's Corner Timeless Magic for today has lots of free info. Okay, that's good to know. Always good to know sources of some free info. Very awesome. Okay, so I'm going to sign off, everybody. But if anybody has any other questions, drop them in the chat. I will go back later and I will answer anything that I missed here. And again, I hope that you guys will join us on Friday for that Gratitude for the Earth ritual. Again, you can look below this video as well. There will be a link that will give the invitation with the information, the Zoom link, and what to gather before the ritual. So we hope to see some of you there. It's Mabon is a holiday that many people will overlook because it's not Samhain or one of those main ones, but I think this is one of the most beautiful holidays, just where we as witches just can give our gratitude back. All right, and then next week, I think that we are going to be looking at the root chakra, but I haven't put my schedule together yet. But we have some great episodes coming up in the future. And until next time, blessed be. Take care, everybody.